En este video me acompañará Justin Sottilare, quien nos compartirá un poquito más de su carrera como jugador, donde jugó en Estados Unidos y luego jugó profesionalmente en 5 diferentes países. Pero más importante, nos va a compartir un poco más de su filosofía como coordinador ofensivo de los Cowboys de Múnich, en Alemania. No solamente respeto mucho su mente ofensiva como coach, pero también me encanta su contenido. También tiene una página de YouTube donde habla de conceptos muy similar a lo que hacemos en 2% Football. Se enfoca en específico en quarterbacks y en coordinadores ofensivos, y creo que es una gran herramienta para coaches jóvenes que quieren crecer en el deporte. Por esto era un fit obvio y quería compartir esta entrevista con ustedes. Si no me conoces, soy Eduardo Sicilia, coach de quarterbacks y coordinador ofensivo en Nebraska, y me encanta compartir de las X y O's de este hermoso deporte. So coach, thank you very much for jumping in here and joining the channel. I really appreciate your time. Specifically, I really believe that coaches that are outside of the States sharing knowledge about this beautiful sport is meaningful. I mean, I guess in my case, I'm physically here, but being from Mexico and you being in Europe, I think it really means a lot. I really like what you do, all the content that you share, specifically for offensive coordinators. So thank you for being here.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what you do, what American Football Academy is all about, just for the viewers who are not aware?
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned, I'm over in Europe. And when you're over here, you have a ton of time on your hands as an import player or coach. And with all that time, I study football basically 24/7 anyways. So I figured I might as well actually put that to use and then try and pass along that knowledge that I've gathered over the decade that I've been over here, and also working with the coaches that I had in the States. Just put that into something that other coaches could use. So essentially, I just started kind of gathering all the information, put them into little lessons or YouTube videos. And I have the YouTube channel. I also have my courses that are way more in depth, like a lot more nerdy into the systems side of things. But that's essentially the entire thing, is just trying to give a ton of resources and information to coaches who are actively looking for that.
I love that. I love that. So where did the idea come from? Can you share a little bit about your football journey, maybe as a player growing up?
Sure. So I played at a terrible high school. We were really, really bad. And then I ended up going, so like literally we went 0-23. And then when I got into college, somehow I got, into a D3 school playing there. And it was actually a very good school, Wesley. They were ranked in the top 5 every single year. And I mean, as you can imagine, right, a complete shift from one to the other, of like a bad program to a consistently dominant program. So then that was kind of the start of me being introduced to the systems that were in place, although I had no idea what I was really looking at or being involved in. And then after graduating, I ended up, I played decent enough to get an offer to come over in Europe and play, and jumping around from team to team in Europe. The beginning, 23 years old, all I wanted to do was travel, because it was either back home I was teaching, or I can, come over here and travel and play. So I went to a ton of different places, and I got a chance to work with a bunch of different coordinators. And I could see that a lot of these teams that I was on or that we were playing against, they were really lacking a lot of the systems that we had at Wesley in my college program. So, kind of practicing and trying to implement all of that stuff into all of these different teams, and working with other offensive coordinators. I always had co-offensive coordinators. So I played quarterback, by the way. And while you're over in Europe, you essentially take the QB role, and a lot of times you end up taking the OC role as well as a quarterback. So that gave me a very unique perspective on like how to organize practices, right? You have to do a lot of delegation if you're going to be an offensive coordinator and playing. It's a very different thing. If you think about like the play calling processes, if you're calling plays on the field versus calling plays on the sidelines, it's completely different things. I've been on teams where there's coaching staff, you have multiple coaches on the staff, you have somebody up in the booth. I've been on teams where you don't even have a booth. So you're just calling plays like directly from the field. So yeah, just taking a lot of that information and kind of just trying to learn from it and just keep improving those things.
I get that. Yeah, I'm in the same place coaching quarterbacks, and you talk a lot about systems, and you mentioned that throughout your videos. I really appreciate that perspective. What would you say is the biggest contrast, let's say, from your high school to your college, where you noticed those systems taken into place?
I think it was in the player development system, particularly just looking at like the offensive coordinator that I have in college or had in college, Coach Knapp. His whole thing, he says this all the time. It was always a joke because he never really meant it. But what he wanted to do was to be able to just sit there and have a hot dog during the game. And he would do that by getting the quarterbacks ready to look at the defense. Okay, what are they in? One high, that looks like they're rolling down, whatever it is. Okay, this doesn't look good. Let's check the play. Let's run this over here. Okay, if we want to tag an RPO, we can do that. But it was always we want to put our quarterbacks in a position to run the entire show. And in order to do that, you obviously have to really focus on football IQ for your team, particularly your quarterback. So that was a massive emphasis. I mean, that's when I was introduced to blocking schemes. That's when I was introduced to if-then statements. If we're running inside zone, where's the nose? Okay, let's run it at the nose. Things like that we didn't have anything like that in high school. And that's just like a fundamental difference in the way that you view your players. If it's, I'm the coach, I want to make the decisions, or I'm the coach and I want to put my players in a position to make decisions. There's a completely two different lenses to look at it. And it changes the result of what you get on the field. So that's probably the biggest thing that I've seen is like a huge difference there.
I love that. I was excited to ask you about your coaching philosophy. So I think we're right along those lines. So if you had to give me a picture of your offense without having to see it on the field, how does a Justin offense looks like?
I like to be very run heavy, which I think is a bit strange. Like I've been in air raid offense. We were 5 receivers, throw a ton of offenses where I was throwing the ball. But what I've learned over time is if you can really, really run the ball well and you have your receivers who are blocking well, then you can always be in any game. And you can kind of control the clock and things like that. So I like to be quite run heavy with it, very simple with concepts, but we'll run the same concept in multiple different ways. Also, it's an if-then statement. So it's also, there are times where we will be, if we get the matchups and if we have the ability to actually attack something, we'll just spread it out and we'll go 5 wide. But it's always based on what the defense is going to give us. So it's kind of variable. And the other thing to think about with the run game versus the pass game, in my opinion, is if we have one mistake in the pass game, that screws the entire play. But we can have 2 to 3 guys mess up, which you'll see that on every single play that you put on, somebody makes a mistake. But if it's on the backside, or even if the running back just makes a guy miss, the run game, you can still have more success. And I think especially at lower levels, like, everything below NFL D1, maybe like high level D2, the run game is really the teams that win championships every single year in high school and over in Europe. It's a lot of teams that can run the ball well. They're fundamentally sound. They have good technique with their offensive linemen. They know the blocking schemes. So I try to emulate a lot of that stuff with what I'm doing.
Nice. Hey, si te está gustando esta entrevista y te gusta este tipo de contenido, las partes más finas del fútbol americano, te recomiendo que te suscribas para que no te pierdas el siguiente video. I think even if we talk about the NFL, it's really interesting how at the beginning of the season, you'll see all these like pass-happy offenses with crazy tendencies that they just studied, during the summer, start to rack up points. But then when winter comes and you need to pound the ball and you need to block and the conditions might not be the best and it's not sunny on Florida, I think you need to be able to run the ball. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm a Dolphins fan every single year.
There you go.
Same damn thing.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about Mike McDaniels in that offense when I was saying that. When it comes to the American Football Academy, what is the mission and objective that you have when it comes to sharing all of this knowledge that you have?
I really do think that it's getting coaches to see that they can win with just being more organized and being more structured with what they do and how they approach things. Because I have conversations with coaches every single day in my email and in the course community, struggling with this, and just asking for advice on things. And a lot of times it's really the same types of things. You need to zoom out and essentially identify what the problem is, and then what is the root of that problem. And it's generally always going to be the way in which you've set up that system, and it's creating a feedback loop that you just don't want. And, if you change how you set that up, then the ripple effect of that is going to have a long-term and also quite immediate effect on the outcome that you put out on the field. And just getting coaches to realize, like, you don't have to spend all day watching film. You don't have to have the best athletes on the field. You can win a lot of games with having athletes who are just not as good, just because you've approached, maybe, you've improved the way in which you practice. You've improved the way in which you teach your players. If they know what they're doing, you might not have the best athlete, but if he knows what position to put his body in to make a block, that can spring a run for 30 extra yards. When even if he's a great athlete, if he misses that block, now you're screwed. You get 2-yard gain. So just trying to help coaches see the bigger picture, zoom out, really find that one problem, the root of the problem, and also keep pulling the right lever over and over for big results.
I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy your content so much. I like to preach on the field that I'd rather have the smartest players compared to the fastest or the strongest. So yeah, kind of like what you said, if we know where to attack this defense, if we know this front will give us this certain look that we're prepared for, then that allows us to act and react quicker on game day. Have you encountered any situation where a player, maybe a coach as well on your courses, but specifically players, are super talented and they might not be buying into your system right away?
Sure. Yeah, that happens quite often. Every year you have at least one athlete who's kind of like that, and it takes conversation. Like the thing is, people generally don't like to buy into something unless they can get the why. And they also need to see proof. And I think this is something like, even for me in my business, there's limiting beliefs. Like, that something might be possible, but until you see it, you don't fully believe in it. So when you have situations like that, try to find a way to give them the success early, right? And this is like every personal trainer does this. Like, you sign up for personal training, let's get you a quick win so you can buy into the process, right? It's the same idea with this. So like, if you have a player who's just not fully understanding why we're operating this way, create a situation where you can then show them like, oh yeah, if I do pay attention to this, if I learn this stuff, it's actually amazing. And, things work. And it's like, oh wow, mind blowing. But like, from a coach's perspective, like, we already know that's right. It's going to work. We've seen it over and over. They just haven't seen it. So we have to make sure that they can actually see it as early as possible.
Can you walk me through an example of maybe a situation where you showed a player like, hey, This is why I'm your coach?
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of years ago, I had this stud receiver who we run our hitch ins the way that I like to do it. So we run a Haas concept: verticals on the inside, verticals on the seam, hitch ins on the outside.
Do you have the option in the inside? Why Duke as well?
It's not in the 3x1 version. You can always tag. We can always tag that, but I don't have that particular one. So when we're running that, a 2x2 situation, we get on the goal line, and his job is, if the corner is pressed, it just becomes an automatic in. And there is no option of like settling outside. And we get into a game, end of the game, 2-minute drill situation to go down and win. And we run the hitch, and he breaks and settles outside instead of breaking and run in. Because in the past, all his coaches always told him, you break and you run it, or break and sit outside, break and sit outside. Right. So QB throws it, pick six. And then the next week, so I show him on film. And then the very next week, we get into the exact same situation on the goal line. And what I tell the quarterbacks, if whoever the defender is over the number 2 receiver, as long as he runs vertical, we trust that we're going to run the hitch in. So we can basically just drop back, stare at that number 2 receiver. If he goes vertical, we throw the hitch in, and we're good to go. And we get to a goal line situation, and we have the exact same route. We throw the thing, complete it, touchdown. And then the feeling that he had, like the look in his eyes and everything after that play, was like, it kind of clicked in that moment of like, I get it. Like, as long as he clears out, if I break and run in, the corner can't undercut it. He can't jump a route that is breaking in. So as long as we can create a little bit of separation, we can body catch that, fall into the end zone, like, we're good to go. So that was a big moment for him. And fun little story.
I love that. And I'll put a diagram right next to this as you were talking about it.
Sure.
If you're in the channel, I just love saying that just find the conflict defender, right? Like, if it's a smash, for example, for us, we have a slant seam concept, which is essentially what that Haas adjustment turns into. Where, that guy over number 2 is our conflict defender. What is he doing, right? So when you simplify everything like that into small little processes, regardless of what the defense does, I think it helps everything out. Like I said, I love that story.
Yeah, for sure.
I was gonna ask you, how do you approach play calling on those like high leverage, high intensity situations, or maybe when a defense is giving you something that you were not expecting during the game?
Yeah, we've had that. I learned my lesson the hard way with seeing we game plan everything for what they shown in the last year, and same defensive coordinator, but he comes out and first game of the season, completely different thing. He even had a scrimmage that we were able to watch, and they were running their same thing just to disguise it for the season opener.
Right.
So that was fun. But just generally the way that I like to approach all game planning stuff is like I already build out templates for everything. So and I always go based off of like purely X's and O's with that. So if we're gonna get a 4-2 over, what are the run concepts that I like, right? Well, is it going to be duo, inside zone, power? What formations am I going to run? I always have everything where I'll draw the formation, I'll draw the defense, and I'll put every run play that I like. I'll put every pass play that I like and whatever coverage they usually base it out of. And I create this giant play pool where you can filter for everything. So if you're playing against 4-2 front with middle field open pattern match type of coverage, then you can just filter for that and you can find all of the beaters for those things. So when you go to your game planning situation, I include a little bit of everything in there. So on my one call sheet, I will have answers for a 3-man front. I'll have answers for a 4-man front. I'll have answers for bear. I'll have answers for middle field open, middle field closed looks, just because I assume that every defensive coordinator is going to have a little bit of wrinkles in there. Generally the level that I'm coaching at is defensives don't just line up in one thing and do one thing. They'll have different fronts for different situations. They'll have different packages. The same way that we will, they'll do the same thing. So you kind of have to have a call sheet that has solutions to everything. And I just really like to plan out everything in advance. So I'm not surprised when that problem arises. It's just like, okay, cool. They're giving us a 3-3 stack right now. We weren't planning for that. What do we like versus this? And it's on the call sheet.
100%. How do you go about teaching your quarterbacks to manage these guises and match their pre-snap read to their post-snap read?
I generally don't have, you can, like how we talked about, like if you just identify the number 2 receiver, run vertical, it's quite a simple thing with that. The other thing is like, I don't have it as, okay, middle field open, you look here, middle field closed, you look here. I don't really like those systems. I like pure progressions. So let's say we look at the spacing concept, 2x2. So we'll have, if it's a 1 high safety look, right, then it's going to be a slant flat. If it's a 2 high safety look, double slant. Right. If you're not sure as a quarterback and you look over to the slant and it looks cloudy, it doesn't really matter. You can just come off of that read because you're going to have your over the ball, you're going to have your angled, deeper like curl route, and then you have your flat. So it's just purely right to left, scanning right to left. And for the majority of the offense, I set things up like that. There's concepts that are not going to be as simple as that. You can give like max protection for something like a deep Yankee, like deep post over and a check down, and then it's just reading the safety. But like just as a general rule, I like to keep the progressions pure progressions. Quarterbacks technically don't even need to know the coverage. It helps because it'll help you get through your reads way faster, and you do need to get through your reads quick, right. But you don't necessarily need to know the coverage at the end of the play. If all you really need to know is, was it middle field open or middle field closed? You don't need to know if it was some version of spot drop 3 or man coverage, pattern match type of 3. You don't really need to know that. You just need to know, okay, well, yeah, it was a middle field closed, so this is why I did this. And then you can kind of go that way. Just simplifying it for the QBs.
Yeah, we like to attack grass, especially with all of these variations of cover 7 and the Saban terminology, and wherever you're trying to match it or not, for us is where's the grass, where can we attack that? So I like the way you approach that. I'm not a big fan of pure progression. We do like to split in half. Obviously, in my case right now, we're working with high schoolers, so it depends on the level. I guess for us, it's a little bit easier to go 2 high, 1 high, this side, that side. I was going to ask you, so we're talking about the Dolphins. Tell me a little bit about some of the trends that you been following along in college or in the NFL that you have incorporated into your system.
The little blast motion is big for me right now. So essentially, You line up in like a wing from a tight end, do a quick motion. So we'll say like we're on hurry, hurry, right? So then we go hurry, hurry, go. And he like the motion starts and he starts in a full speed sprint. And this is a way for you to go from a 2x2 into a 3x1 or a 3x1 into a 2x2 in a very quick way. And let's say we decide, in the past I've used like a slow, like we get across, but then he's going to kind of get set there. That allows the front to shift. But if you do a quick motion, then you don't give them any opportunity to do that. And if they can, we actually have our game coming up. We have some crafty things that I think we're going to do with that. So we'll see how that plays out. It's really beneficial in terms of getting numbers over there. You can run duo when it doesn't look like you can run it. You can run power in a situation like that where it doesn't really look like you can, but then you can quickly motion to it. And then you're actually in the position to run things like that. So I think that one's quite beneficial. Another thing would be tighter formations with a lot more crossing routes, a lot more motions. And I like to do a lot more of that, but only in a way that's like, we'll cross to spread right. Rather than saying spread right cross or trips right cross, we'll cross to spread right. So in the players' minds, all they think is spread right. So the concept is quite easy for them. But from the defensive perspective, they see 3x1 to 2x2, so they have to communicate. We already know the end formation, so we can kind of operate very quickly with that. Add a lot more of those things in there, and it's still pretty simple for us, for our players, and for our quarterback. Make it more complex for them.
Nice. We have been testing some of the bunch formations and tighter alignments.
Sure.
I just went to this clinic. We had a receivers coach, I want to say from Arkansas or Oklahoma, I can't remember. He was talking about how they use their sprayed releases and how they always want to have at least 3 routes of the same release. So they go from like a tight bunch and they have like a spray release, out and go, out and up, I guess. And then like a spray release squirrel, almost comeback-ish at 17, 18 yards. So yeah, we've been testing that out to have tighter formations and use that spray release to our advantage and create more spacing closer to the sidelines.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's not new for the NFL coaches,
right,
but I think there's a trickle-down effect of knowledge. And one of the things that I kind of discovered a couple of years ago that I've been really, really working to implement and trying to teach this to other coaches as well in the courses is layering your offense. And exactly what you were talking about. You take the same release, everything pre-snap and even immediately after post-snap, it looks the exact same, but then you have 3 different things that are kind of layered on top of that. That's a big one that like every elite offense has that, right? Yeah. That's a fundamental difference between elite offenses and everybody else is the elite ones, everything is layered. It's everything is with intent and it's going to build into something else.
Yeah. There's another channel that talks about everything's a go until it's not, right? For wide receivers.
Sure.
So more in the macro aspect of offensive architecture, I guess. Same thing, like everything will look the same until it's not. At least that's how we try to preach it over here as well.
Yeah.
How do you balance using this innovation and incorporating new concepts that we might see at Coach Dan Casey's Instagram page to staying tight in your fundamentals? This is the system and we just run it this way.
Yeah, I think that's, I talk about that in some of the stuff that like when people look at Dan Casey's stuff, I think that they get carried away with all the excitement that you can have from the different play designs, but they forget that like he's been at this for a long time. Like he has mastered his craft. So he's in the position to be able to do whatever crafty things that he wants because he's already mastered the fundamentals. Most people kind of skip that fundamental phase and they just go right to the fancy stuff.
Right.
So I think one thing is like to always remind yourself to not do that. Don't get into shiny object syndrome. If I open up my Instagram right now and I look at saved things, I don't know how many I have from him, but it's a ton. And what I do is I'll save things only if I can look at the play and with my own terminology, it's not difficult. I can get into that play call very, very easily. Then it's to me, it's worth looking at. And then you might be able to incorporate it. But again, only if it's connected to 2 to 3 other puzzle pieces. That's like the fun part of being a coordinator is like looking at all this ocean of information and trying to find cool ways that fit within your offense, that don't require almost any teaching whatsoever, but it's just a wrinkle. Maybe it's a tag that you can add, or it's just a change of a formation or a shift or something like that. But it has to already fit what you're doing. And if it doesn't, then you have to be disciplined enough to say that's not for us, at least not right now. So that's the way I would do it.
I think that's a conversation that's super valuable for offensive coordinators. Like you said, shiny object syndrome, there's so many plays, and sometimes it's exactly the same concept that you're running, just in a different formation, and they just make it look fancy. I saw like a mesh rewind by Clemson where it's just mesh, but instead of having the over, the guy running the shallow turns it into like a sail. And I mean, yeah, it might seem nice, but if you already have that mesh and the over combination there within your concepts, I guess you don't have to get there unless you just want to throw a wrinkle at the system. How would I phrase this? Is it worth having a package of maybe 5-ish plays that hey, they have never seen this on film, so we can maybe surprise them this week with a concept that's familiar to us, but in a different presentation? Or would you rather have, hey, these are my 3 concepts, I'm just going to run them, we have solutions for every single problem they might throw at us?
Yeah, I think everything has to be with a specific intent for the defense. I don't like creating things, like you talk about that mesh rewind, like I'm very certain if you asked the coordinator why they did that, they would be able to tell you why. There was a specific reason with the way in which they passed off. Maybe that defense had a rule that they were trying to exploit. So for me, I don't want to add things just for the sake of adding things. If it's, even if the reason is to surprise them, I don't really like that. What I would say is if we can surprise them with something that breaks a tendency that we have, sure, right? Because now you're stacking, you're adding layers to that. Or if it's, hey, we've seen something that we can exploit. We don't have it in our offense, but maybe for this 1 week, we do want to install something new. I am fine with saying like, hey, we're going to install something. We're doing this week, right? We're going to have an outside zone variation where nothing changes for the O-line, nothing whatsoever. But the only difference is we're going to have the quarterback be the one who runs, just because it's a numbers game and we have the ability to take that. Because of the alignment that they're going to have, we can exploit it. But before this week, that wasn't even a discussion. But the film shows this is a numbers game that we think that we can play and win. We can take that. So like that's a wrinkle they're not going to be prepared for. They won't see it. Depends on when you publish this. Right. But they won't see it. They won't know about it. But it's for a purpose. It is to exploit a specific weakness that we found. That's the only reason, right? Not just because, hey, let's try it. It's not like that.
How much do you take into account your talent within your team? I think for us offensive coordinators, it's a little bit easier to scheme things going into the summer. But at least for me, it makes it way easier when I know what type of personnel I'm working with. I love quarterback run game. And if I have a dual threat, yeah, sure. Like I'm going to be expecting some of that to be sprinkled into my offense. But if I know I have a pocket passer, that might change my plans. How do you go about that?
Yeah, I like to build the system in a way that I can use the same system. And I have used the exact same system for years and years and years. And sometimes I've had a scrambling quarterback, sometimes I haven't. And depending on what we have, the offense will look completely different. Conceptually, it's the same. We can run duo with 2 tight ends and a running back. We can run duo with a 10 personnel, and we have our running back kick out the play side defensive end, and it's quarterback duo. It's still duo. The offensive line still has their same blocking rules, so nothing changes. But then if you look from a zoomed out perspective, it's like, oh, they're doing a completely different thing. No, we're not doing different things. We're doing the same thing, but we're just adapting it based on the personnel. In previous years, right now I said a lot more run heavy right now. Right. In the past, I've been very, very pass heavy, like super pass happy. And I tagged RPOs with everything, but it doesn't really fit the personnel this year. So now it's a lot more of a run heavy system. If you're gonna be a run heavy system, you also need to have the play actions, the boot passes, the deep shots. You also need a really good screen game as well to, kind of complement that and take some of the pressure off of the run game. Right. So we're a lot more focused on things like that now than we were in previous years. Just you got to have your base offense. Okay. Everything is set, systems, the processes, the terminology, all that. Now, what do we have and what works best with our guys? And that's the way you have to approach it consistently.
Coach, and feel free to go as in-depth as you want to. Like I said, I'll have the diagram right next to it. But if you would get stranded on an island and you can only bring one running concept and one passing concept. Yep. Okay, duo. Okay, duo. Why?
To me, duo has solutions to almost everything. And the only thing that I have found that really has beaten that is adding extra numbers into the box off the edge that we wouldn't be able to pick up. And then all we do is add numbers and add numbers and add numbers. So
do you RPO off of that?
You can. I mean, you can. We do a little bit as well. If we go with an 11 personnel look, we'll have an RPO, a screen to the field, a little out or a slant or something like that, or a glance into the boundary.
Right.
But I just tend to like to give it, because the read from the running back and the way in which the offensive line is blocking, it's very difficult at this level for people to completely stuff that. We just had a game a couple of weeks ago in our first scrimmage of the season, and some things weren't really working, and we just switched to duo and just kept running duo the whole game. We obviously had to add a couple of things, some tunnel screens and things like that off of that, and a couple of deep shots. Just if you're going to really commit to it, right? If you're going to just totally stack the box, okay, then we're going to take our shot, but you're going to have to do that first. You're going to have to stack the box first. And if you don't, if we're going to play the numbers game here, we're going to win the leverage on our blocks. We're going to let our running backs make the right reads, and we're going to get 3 to 4 yards a pop on that. And one of them is also going to break for something big. So that to me is a concept that I learned only in the last few years. I think it was maybe 2023 was the first time that I ever ran duo. And I just kind of dove into it, like really, really leaned in heavy with it. And it's just quickly become my favorite concept. So nice. Duo in the run game. Yep.
How about the passing game?
Passing game. Probably stick. Probably a stick concept.
Okay.
With the number one and the number two kind of switching responsibilities. So if you have that, and I also treat stick a little bit differently. I treat stick as a full field concept. So it has the pure progression read to it. So if you switch the number one and the number two from a 3x1, number one runs the gain hitch or hinge, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. Number two runs the slot fade. So you automatically have your built-in man beater. If it's going to be man coverage, you can throw your slot fade. You have your stick, which is going to run an option, right? You either settle in space, you break for the out. On the backside, I like to run a dig by the X. So now I can create a triangle read if I have my running back work into the flats. Right. I now have two triangles essentially. Deep, flat, stick. That's one triangle, and on the backside, I have the stick, dig, running back, check down, and that one is still one of my favorite concepts. It can beat every coverage. The only thing that really is a problem with that is if they can press and they can play man, and also we can't win the one-on-ones with the slot fades. If that's the case, then we're probably just gonna have to do something different, crossing routes or something like that.
Nice. We call that concept shock. So we have stick, nice. And then that's kind of like our tag shock for the slot fade. Yeah. I think, and I could be wrong here, but I think ever since Matthew Stafford got into the Rams, a lot of teams started incorporating that backside dig, and now everyone's running that little hitch underneath it. Some call it bounce, some call it squire. I've seen teams call it hammer. I really like that high-low on that overhanging defender, especially kind of like what you said. If I don't like my play side, I come back to my backside and it's coming right into my line of vision. I really, really like that for quarterbacks. It's an easy way to get out of trouble. And now you have the check down too as well. I mean, a 5-yard gain, I'll take 5 yards any day of the week.
For sure.
Coach, one last question. So last but not least, what advice would you give coaches who are interested in becoming really good offensive coordinators in the future?
Always look at the systems. Essentially just looking at it and saying, what are all of the critical success factors that are related to me being successful in this? And this can really apply to any position in the world. Like, it doesn't matter what job you're in, but what does it take to be successful at that? And if you kind of dig deep enough, then you'll find a handful of things that are very, very important. critical, and you basically just start chipping away at those and saying, okay, well, I need to have a good player development system. I need to, as a coach, I need to be able to develop players. What exactly does that take, right? What's included in developing players? So you'd have to define all the techniques, right? You have to have a very clearly defined playbook. If you don't know what the playbook is, you don't know the blocking rules, you can't tell the players to be able to do them. You have to define those first. So that's going to be a part of it. Also, make sure you define your techniques, right? What's the first step? What are the hand placements? How do we want those things? How do we want the players to be able to run those routes and all that stuff? So once all that is defined, then you need to look at the players. Okay, what do they need to be able to accomplish in this system to have success, right? Quarterbacks, they need to be able to make quick decisions. They have to be able to be accurate. They have to have good mechanics. Okay, now from there, what can we do to develop mechanics? What can we do to develop the football IQ? How can we improve decision making? It's not just drops and throws. That is not going to solve the problem. They're not going to develop as a quarterback by just in the indies, just dropping back and throwing the ball, dropping back and throwing the ball. That isn't going to solve the problem that you really want. So it's just asking the right questions and then ignoring your ego, taking that out of it and just saying, okay, what is really going to be the thing that actually drives this whole thing? What moves the needle? And then if you keep asking those questions, eventually you'll come to some pretty good solution.
Yeah, sorry about that. I guess we have commercial breaks in this channel.
Oh, good.
All right, Coach. Well, yeah, you were talking a little bit about offensive coordinators, maybe quarterback coaches who want to grow into being one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give for coordinators, if they're just trying to improve their development as quick as possible, would be to shift the focus over to systems. I'm a little bit obsessed with this, but it's for good reason. If you take a look at, essentially just kind of boil it down to like, what are the critical success factors of me as a coach that would take me from wherever I'm at right now to where I want to be, right? That's the gap that we have. How can I get there? And what's the fastest path to that? And if you ask a lot of questions, you'll end up essentially, boiling down to a handful of like very fundamental things. Like, I need to be able to develop my players. I have to be able to set up a really good playbook. I need to be able to design effective practices. I have to be able to recruit. So there's a handful of these systems that are in place, and each of those things has their own details. So as mentioning before, like with the player development system, if you want to be able to take a player and get them from A to B, what do they need to be able to do, right? For receivers, they need to be able to, first of all, they need to know the offense. They need to be able to be good at getting off press release. They have to be able to catch. They have to be able to know the different types of breaks and be able to, physically perform those types of breaks that are in the offense. Maybe, for my particular offense, I need my receivers, they have to be really good at blocking. They also have to be good decision makers, because I do a lot of stuff where it's, hey, we're running the stick concept. I'm either settling in space or I'm going to breaking out. I have to be able to make that decision. So once I know how I can get my receivers or what I need them to do, I need to know how to train them. That's a part of the player development system. And if all of my drills are run to a cone, break, run to a cone, break, they're not developing any decision-making abilities. And that's critical for my offense. So if I can get them to be better, then I become better as a coordinator, right? And I'll be able to win more games that way. It's really just looking at all of the, zooming out, looking at everything that's a part of it, which are the systems, and focus on that. That's the fastest path to growth, the least amount of headaches. You're not gonna have to spend all day watching film. If you can improve 1 to 2% in all these different areas, that has a massive impact. So quickest way to do it, I think.
100%. You talked about the season, right? And I think once you get in there and we're in the rush and you're game planning for every single team, you're in the thick of it. During the off season, do you have a certain plan that you go through? Do you take a little bit of a rest, maybe a couple of months before you go back into football mode?
Days.
Okay.
I'm like I'm a little bit 24/7 with this stuff, but I do believe that you have to get to a point of missing it, and for me that does occur after a couple of days, because this is all I do with my time, right? I coach, and then I have my business, which is all football based. I have like 15 of these shirts and I just wear them every single day. I'm locked into football. So yeah, for me, you just get away from it for a little bit, get back to missing it. As soon as you have that itch that like, I need to watch film or something like that. Okay. Then you can start back up again. I think also the off season is a really good time to focus on like stepping back and saying, looking at your own habits, right? As a person. So are you working out even as an offensive coordinator, right? Are you working out? Are you eating healthy? And just doing a big review with things like that. Yeah. But then, yeah, the whole process for the off season, that's also one of the fundamental systems that I talk about. So, you know, it's data collection. It's a brainstorming phase. It's analyzing all of, you know, taking a look at your player development system, taking a look at your practice design, your game planning processes, your play calling processes, and then saying, what can we do better in each of these categories? To me, this is what the off season is for. And that's really where there's a lot of brainstorming. I like to use the phrase of an idea meritocracy, which is essentially the best idea is going to win. It doesn't matter who it comes from, right? You sit down with your whole staff. Somebody can be walking by randomly, have nothing to do with your team. And if they drop an amazing idea, that's a brilliant idea. We can run with that. It doesn't matter who it comes from. So it's again, taking the ego out of it and saying, what can we do better? Right? What can we do better? And then just, you know, going through that whole thing, re-looking at your technique manuals, re-looking at your playbook, adding any tweaks in there. So that's the fun part of the off season is the playbook stuff, right? That's where I always tell coaches, like, don't look at Dan Casey's stuff in the middle of the season. Don't do it. But in the off season, that's when you want to explore, right? Sit down with a notebook, actually, you know, go through the whole thing, go through his profile, draw up a bunch of stuff. And that's what the off season is. It can be good for that stuff.
No, I love it. I love it. You have no idea how much this means to me because same over here, I'm obsessed with football. On the business side of things, 2% football, we provide scouting reports for football teams, like highly tailored scouting reports on a weekly basis. So yeah, this is the thing. Like they ask me, what's my hobby outside of football? It's like, oh, watching the NFL, probably playing some Madden here and there. So yeah, I miss it probably just as much as you do once the games are done. Where can we find you? Obviously, American Football Academy. I'll tag the link and the YouTube page. But maybe is there a way for people to watch you guys' games online?
If there are streams, I'll send the streams over afterwards. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, I mean, AmericanFootballAcademy.com. There's dashes in between because it wasn't available with the regular just one word.
Yeah.
But it's got the dashes in there. I have Instagram and Facebook and stuff, but I don't post much on there. But YouTube and the website are the best places to reach.
Okay. Well, Coach, you mentioned you were just done with your first scrimmage, so best of luck during the season. I really appreciate your time. 2% football, and our viewers appreciate your time.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's a great conversation.
Thank you very much. Esa fue una gran entrevista, me encantó. Y por cierto, no había hecho entrevistas en un buen rato, entonces espero les haya gustado. ¿Tienen a alguien que les gustaría que entrevistara? ¿O tienes alguna pregunta que te gustaría que le hiciera a nuestro siguiente invitado? Déjame saberlo en los comentarios. Con eso, una vez más, soy Eduardo Sicilia y esto fue 2% Football.